everybody. Welcome to the Fundamentalists. I'm Elliot Morgan. This is the Honorable Peter Rollins as well, here with us today on this very special episode, which is all about the ick. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with what the ick is. So I will read what it is from the top entry of one of the more scholarly sources that we have here, which is urbandictionary.com. So if you go urbandictionary.com, the ick says you could be on the chirps with a guy or girl. Everything seems to be going fine. You think you like them, but then you suddenly catch, the ick. From then on, you can't look at the person in the same way. You just progressively get more and more turned off by them, weirdly, and maybe for no reason in particular, grossed out by them. You'll cringy at the thought of you and them together. Nothing will be the same. You won't be able to do it any longer and eventually have to cut it off. Ideology courtesy of Olivia from Love Island. So I guess that's from Love Island. So I suggested this because for a couple of reasons. One is I love the term. I like what it sounds like, and I like how clearly what it means is evident right away. But I also am fascinated by the switch-like part of immediately going, I no longer like this person, and there's no coming back from it. Like that kind of scales fall off the eyes, something happened, and now I have the ick. So,
yeah.
What do you make of that, Pete? Have you ever experienced the ick either on the receiving end or the giving end? And you don't have to mention if you don't want, but just curious.
Yeah, no, I've probably experienced it on both sides, like most people. I think I had heard of the term when you mentioned it, but I don't know if I'd heard anybody use it in that way. But as soon as I read the definition that you sent me, I was like, oh, yeah, I know that well.
Right.
There's lots of interesting things to say about it, but I actually was talking to a friend, it was about, well, last year maybe, and she has this a lot, and she has gone out with a number of guys, and she says it's almost like everything's wonderful, everything's great. And then, just like you said, the scales fall off. Like there's a moment, and she said she was going out with somebody, and they'd been actually together for a long time. They just had a kid together. And she said that she just suddenly looked at him, and it was almost like she saw like a bar at the side of her visual field of desire just drop to zero.
Yeah.
And, a few months passed, and eventually they obviously broke up. But it was like seemingly out of nowhere, something happened, some ethereal thing. And the person you were once super attracted to, you suddenly, there's no attraction whatsoever. And there's actually, as you say, like a almost sometimes a visceral dislike.
You just mentioned people who had a kid when this happened to.
Yeah.
You know, just the ick does not have limitations. It doesn't. I don't think it discriminates about what your situation is. If it
Yeah.
hits, it hits.
And that's the thing about it. It's not a gradual decline in love, where you're maybe arguing more, or it's getting a little bit worse. We're talking about something that can kind of weirdly happen overnight. You just suddenly, the person that you were so sexually attracted to, it's gone. It
It's
happens a
like
lot, obviously, a lot in relationships.
yeah, it's like it reminds me of when in my early days of going to Carpenter's Home Church in Lakeland, Florida, and they would have the revivals, and you get slain in the spirit, or you suddenly have the holy laughter, and you're suddenly just caught up in the charismatic movement, whatever it was. It's like the opposite. It's like a sudden. It's like the spirit moves, but the spirit moves you away from the person. Like
Yes.
you're done.
Yes. And here's a really interesting dimension to it as well, is that sometimes the ick, and there's a name for it in continental philosophy, which we'll get to, but the ick for
Right.
now, it can happen precisely when you get what you want. The ick can happen precisely when the girl you've been chasing for a year suddenly says yes and kisses you. And weirdly, basically within the moment of you being together, the ick happens, and you
Yep.
suddenly don't want her. Same with a woman pursuing a guy or whatever, whoever you're pursuing. It's a strange thing that in the very moment of getting the thing that you think you want, it might be recognition, even like you're maybe an aspiring actor, you've always desired recognition, And strangely, the moment that you get the recognition, it suddenly means not even nothing to you. You almost feel disgusted by it.
Repulsed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, a example, when I first like heard the term, it was months ago during the Super Bowl, and it was when it was at the end, and it was like during the post game celebration, and I don't remember the exact circumstances, but it was Taylor Swift looking at Travis Kelsey as he was accepting the, I don't know what it was, player of the game or whatever. And he did something, or he said, I think he started singing maybe. And there's this look on Taylor Swift's face that is just this kind of like, and everyone was like, oh, she just got the ick, like she just caught it. And it is like a funny, it's a funny moment. And clearly they're still together. And, of course I wish them the best. But it's ever since then I've been like, oh man, that's such a good, I've seen it myself give the ick back in the day, when I would smoke things that I don't smoke anymore, and like a cigarette, people would
Yeah.
go, I've heard people go like, oh, that's gross. And but that's just like being grossed out by smoke. I don't know how much that's technically the ick. I feel like the ick is more supernatural, like
Yeah.
in or seemingly supernatural.
Yes, no, I think that's a great way of saying it. Like seemingly supernatural is because the perfect ick is when nothing really seems to have changed in
Mm-hmm.
the physical world at all.
Yeah.
As I say, even you may have even got the thing you wanted, like nothing in the material realm has changed, but suddenly you comport yourself differently to that realm. You suddenly
Mm-hmm.
just no longer enticed or attracted by it. And I mean, it's not dissimilar to conversion, what religious people talk about conversion, because in conversion, nothing changes in a sense, but you can suddenly find yourself not interested in what you used to be interested in and now interested in what you used to not. So, like a typical testimony in a charismatic church might be, I used to be interested in money. I used to be just interested in my career, succeeding symbolically, or seeing myself as sexually potent, or whatever it is. And then overnight, I had this conversion, and what used to mean everything to me now means nothing to me. So there's a cosmic ick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cosmic ick. That's good. Another definition that just to support what we're talking about, something someone does that is an instant turn off for you, making you instantly hate the idea of being with them romantically. So there is an instantaneous element to it that it's kind of like, I think when you're at the optometrist and he's flipping through the lenses and you're like, can't see it, can't see it, can't see it, and they go, and then everything, you're like, oh no, that's it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. This is not disconnected from what happens in psychoanalysis sometimes, where uh, sometimes analysis is designed to actually evoke the ick. So sometimes, like we think of the ick as negative. It's like you desire something, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, you no longer desire it. But sometimes we desire things that are bad for us. So we desire always somebody who rejects us. We find ourselves not being attracted to people who are nice to us. We're only attracted to people who spurn us, right? So
Yeah.
the in that sense, you're kind of wanting the ick, right? You're going like, there's something about these people that I find incredibly enticing, and I can't wean myself off them. So what you actually want, and obviously this isn't in the Urban Dictionary, but it should be in it. This somebody should
We'll add
add
it.
this. Yeah, we add it. Is that sometimes when you realize that what you desire is damaging for you, the ick is exactly what you desire, because it basically means you're no longer sexually attracted to that person. You're no longer anchored into them, and you can then go off and do
Yep.
something else.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, it sounds a lot like your sort of classic projection of like you're projecting onto them this fantasy that you have of them. And then in an instant when that fantasy is broken, the projection gets withdrawn, and all of a sudden you're just looking at the person as the person. And that's not what you signed up for. What you signed up for was the fantasy.
Exactly, exactly. And this is a way to maybe differentiate between cognitive therapies and analysis, because in cognitive therapies, one certain techniques are sometimes used. For example, well, trying to reprogram your brain a little bit, or even kind of if you've got some phobia, trying to desensitize you, and these kinds of different different ideas. But if you take the ick seriously, there's something we can get into how this works, but let's just say there's a switch in you, and if you can hit that switch, you don't have to desensitize yourself. You don't have to like do this battle in which you have to kind of like, try to force
Fight
yourself
it.
to
Yeah.
separate, and all of that difficult stuff. It's like you with smoking. Funny enough, you brought that up, but there was one point when you tried to give up smoking in the past, but then there was one point where you just found it icky. Like you just
Yeah.
and you didn't even is this true? From what I
No.
remember, you didn't even really have to fight it.
Ironically, though, I did do cognitive behavioral.
Oh, that's
So
right. You read that book. That's right. I
no, it wasn't
forgot.
even the book. It was a app called Quit Sure, and yeah, it did work. Like, I mean,
So what
for
did
all
it
intents and
do? Tell
purposes.
me what it did. So see if I can like
It was
square the
like
circle.
40 minutes of videos that you'd watch every day. And some videos you watched like 4 or 5 times, but they were like 3-minute videos. And it was the most and then there'll be like something that you would read and it would give you like an exercise. It was the most easiest thing I've ever done, but it was like $40. And I was like, let's just see if it works. It seems to have great reviews. And so I think it was just like purposefully hypnotizing and icking myself out. And it was like, and they basically are like, it's going to suck for a few days and then you'll be fine. And
Yeah.
that's exactly, and even for a few days, they're like, it's mostly them lying to you about how bad the withdrawals are. Like you're brainwashed into thinking the withdrawals are actually really bad, but in reality, it's the brainwashing that's bad. And so
Yeah.
it kind of tries to deprogram you.
Okay,
So that
because
kind of goes against what you're.
it does. So I have to square that circle, and you're
Well, I'll
maybe
go get some cigarettes then. I'll just.
yes, get you smoking again. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether so one reason why people smoke and is because it's cool. It looks cooler. It looked cool. There was a time where
Yeah.
smoking was associated with being mysterious, being contemplative, being calm under pressure. There was all of these symbolic dimensions to smoking, which made it desirable. And so one way to get over smoking is by removing the object cause of desire, objet putia, which is what I think the ick is, right? There's the object of desire, the cigarette. There's the object cause of desire, that it's enigmatic. You look cool under stress, all of that. Also, death drive. You're killing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
All of these cool things. But then if you're able to get rid of that and just see smoking for what it is, you might give it up. So I don't know whether there was an element of that in this,
Mm-hmm.
that the smoking was robbed of its enigmatic dimension, or
Yeah, it did an interesting there were interesting exercises in it where it would be like pay close, it would be like don't stop smoking. Like the whole time it would be like just keep smoking cigarettes as much as you want. And then they would say anytime you smoke, pay really, really close attention to the actual act of smoking and don't focus on anything else but smoking. Don't think about work, don't think about what you're stressed about. Just focus on the taste of it, how it makes your fingers smell, how it looks as it's going down, like what it, um, how you feel afterward, like physically, like, your pulse and everything. So I think that is a big part, because rather than sitting there smoking, thinking you look cool, thinking about whatever's going on and mindlessly doing it, it forces you to be like, oh, this is actually like an unpleasant,
yeah.
objectively unpleasant experience when you remove all of that other stuff.
That's interesting because in the old days, monks would sometimes, well, they would sometimes sleep in the same bed as beautiful women, to test themselves, to not do anything sexual. And one of the techniques that they would use is to imagine the woman, various things. One is all their internal organs, like just underneath the skin, the pus and the blood and all this
That kind of
half.
turns me on. That's kind of
Yeah,
like my thing.
that's your thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love that. I love guts.
Yeah, half digested food. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. Acid,
Yeah.
stomach acid.
That's your objet putia right there.
Yeah.
And they'd also like imagine, the person really old and wrinkly, and it sounds not dissimilar in that once you now the idea was you kind of see the person in reality without fantasy, without a phantasmatic
Yeah.
blanket. And, you know, or even if you look super close, their skin would be porous and sweaty or whatever. And when you're kind of confronted with the object of desire without the veil of fantasy, your desire will dissipate. So I
Yeah.
wonder whether it's a version of that that kind of was happening with you in those
Yeah.
videos. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But so going back to the difference between cognitive and
Oh yeah.
analysis, because
Yeah.
the idea is that with the cognitive, you're gonna reprogram, you're getting in there, you're gonna repeat the same thing. Let's use a different example. Like you're, what would be a different example? You're gonna give up, you're gonna fall, and you're gonna think positively, and then you're gonna be happier. That's
Yeah,
kind of the
maybe like you
classic,
always
right?
get fired. Maybe you're always causing problems at work, or you're always late, or I don't know what
Yeah.
system, you know, you could grab.
So you get up, you're gonna wake up 10 minutes earlier every day. You're gonna make, it's really like analog, right? Like you're gonna do this and it's gonna cause a chain reaction that's gonna eventually stick. And then
Mm.
you're gonna never have to worry about it again. Whereas analysis is getting into the object petit a is how it's pronounced. A lot of people don't know that.
Yes, that's the perfect way to pronounce it.
Mhm.
I always say just object A, but Lacan didn't
Yeah.
want to translate it.
Object
But
petit a.
objet patia. So object A. Yeah, so like in analysis, the question would be, are you enjoying being late? Not consciously, because consciously you're not enjoying being late. You're going to get fired. It's a problem. But unconsciously, are you getting something out of being late? Like, for example, is it anger? Is it frustration at your work? So unconsciously, you're saying screw you to the workplace or to your boss. Is it that you're replaying something in terms of like wanting to evoke concern from those people who work in your whatever, and you want recognition, whatever it is? That in analysis, there's more of a thing of like, you're getting something out of this. And if we can understand what that is and you can confront it, you can drain it of its enjoyment. So in cognitive therapies, they don't go into the unconscious. So it's not about draining something of its enjoyment, not
Yeah.
explicitly anyway. But in analysis, it's always about kind of like draining something of its enjoyment. And with the ick for me is about what makes you enjoy the object of your desire. There's the object of your desire. Not the ick, sorry. There's the ick is when you lose the
Yeah.
what makes the thing desirable, which is and as I say, sometimes that's bad, and psychoanalysis has to help you get it back. So in a couple who have lost the object cause of their desire, so they no longer want to sleep together, they no longer have a physical attraction together, then some analysis is involved in trying to go, okay, let's figure out what the object A is. So for example, with an obsessive guy might only be attracted to a woman who is distant, uh, difficult to win over, always elusive and kind of impossible, right? So maybe that's a desire. So whenever they
Yeah.
get married and now that elusiveness and that coldness and that impossibility is gone, they find the ick. The answer is
Yeah.
potentially to try to find a way to bring impossibility back into the relationship.
So I've Googled or YouTubed some stuff on and read a little on object patia.
Oh,
Uh, and it is like deceptively complex or deceptively, because it sounds easy to understand at first.
it's
You want
not.
something and then there's a reason that you want it. Yeah, there's like object, cause of desire. It's not just that you want a thing for it, you want a thing because of something that is not, or
Yes.
whatever.
Can I give an
Uh,
example and then you keep
please.
going? So, example I've used before because I have a friend who she always loved looking at houses. She wanted to buy a house, and she was always going on the internet, going visiting places, checking prices. But when she finally bought the house, uh, she found herself very disappointed, right? Because in a way, the object of her desire was the house, but the object cause of desire was looking for the
Mhm.
house. Like she was getting actually more enjoyment from comparing the prices, seeing different areas, looking at what's possible. So once she got the house and she lost the pursuit of the house, she got what she desired, but she no longer desired it. So that's one simple way, but it gets complicated. But keep going.
She should have been a realtor.
Yeah, yeah, maybe, and that's the way to do it. Actually, that's
Yeah.
the way to bring your desire back. Yeah.
Uh, no, yeah. So I'm happy to hear you give more examples because, and I'm also curious about Lacan's, like how he formulated this and how it is radical in comparison to other ideas, such as the kind of traditional idea of projection. Like, is it because it's tied in with his sort of tripartite, whatever, the real, imaginary, and symbolic, or is it like, is it because it is so inherently unachievable or like attainable? Like that is that part of what it is? Like what makes object TA such a good sound theory,
Yes, brilliant. And
or
yeah,
whatever you want to call it?
yeah, no, that's great. And it's true. Like Lacan said, out of all of his contributions, this was his most important. So Lacan himself thought that this object A idea was his most important contribution to the world of theory and the world of the
Wow.
clinic. Yeah. Um, and like you said, like in one way, it's because within kind of the Freudian Lacanian school of analysis, lack and impossibility are obviously, we've talked about it, it's kind of central. And objet petit a is a type of impossibility, a type of lack. Um, so it becomes very, very important because in a way, if this is a true concept, it means you can never be fully content and happy because you can never have object A. You can never fully have the object of your desire. And once you acknowledge that, then therapy becomes something else. In fact, I think that's where therapy becomes analysis, right? Analysis is how to live with frustration, with impossibility, with suffering. Uh, but it is, as you said, it's a deceptively complicated concept, but uh, it's embedded in the idea that, and this is in Freud, that the infant has a question about how they fit into the desire of the other. So, which, by the way, is the very basis of ethics, right? Ethics is empathy for the other, and how are we,
Yeah.
how do we connect with the other, et cetera, et cetera. And so, very early on, we are all kind of like interconnected with the others around us. And then there's the primary narcissism where we disconnect. But the infant has a question of why am I desirable to my mother, my father? And as they begin to try to answer that, uh, they encounter this enigma. Uh, in a nutshell, if, for example, a child feels that they have lacked recognition in their life, so they don't have recognition, they never felt they were seen by their parents and by their siblings, then this is a kind of lack or gap in their childhood that then starts to influence their adult life. So now they find themselves always seeking recognition, in whether it's in writing or in acting or in their work or in their love life. So suddenly seeking recognition becomes a thing. And then the trick is, if say this is a woman and she meets a guy who is not giving her recognition, he's kind of there, but he's kind of like he's not interested in her in a way that echoes her past, right? So she becomes very attracted to this, and she's very attracted to this guy. Then uh, once she gets the guy, and that recognition is given to her, she will potentially get the ick.
Yeah.
Because actually the object of desire is the look of recognition from this father figure, but the object cause of desire is the pursuit of recognition, just
Mhm.
the pursuit of that. And in a way, Lacan is saying, if you lose the pursuit, it robs life of all its meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, I get it. It's like, well, I don't get it, but that's a strong statement. Easy, Elliot. Let's
Yeah.
not start making people think you get it. I'm thinking about Freud saying, I think it was Freud, like the my goal is to turn misery into everyday unhappiness or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. What a brilliant line, man.
Good stuff.
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
pithy,
Yeah.
very good. Nailed it, Freud. I was watching this thing on pageant balls, which is my new favorite term.
name for your testicles?
Excuse me, not pageant balls, purity balls.
Okay, purity balls. Is that the new name, favorite name for your testicles?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I call it. Well, purity ball one and or purity ball one, purity ball two, and then
Purity
redfish,
ball.
bluefish. The It was on Fundy Fridays, Jen and James channel, great
Oh,
channel. They did a video on purity balls, which are they should have called them purity pageants because it would have been alliterative and less suggestive, but they obviously wanted to call it purity balls for a reason. And
yeah.
they are pageants that fathers take their daughters to ensure that they sign contracts that they're going to stay virgins until they are married. And it goes into the guy who created the purity balls, and there's this one point where they're being interviewed by like 60 Minutes or something. And the interviewer is like, this is kind of Freudian. And the guy laughs and he goes, it's not Freudian. I wasn't thinking about Freud at all when I was at the purity ball. And I thought that was very funny. I was like, oh, you're not. Yeah, that is kind of the point, man. That's like the whole thing. But it was going into the Oedipal, like, uh, idea of it, and it was just showing like on full display these grown men just being like, you're my daughter and you're gonna sign this thing and you're not gonna. It's a crazy world that these guys got into. And then some of them and then they would dress up as knights, and they would have the men would have like swords, and it's all that they were like, we're gonna protect the damsel and the hero's journey and all this stuff. And it was just very, very entertaining, but wildly Freudian. And yeah, it
Yeah.
gave me the ick.
Yes. There's another element to that. That's amazing as well. I don't know much about that, but there's a sense in which this obviously to certain obsessive men makes a woman more attractive. Like, so one of the flirtatious games is for a woman to hold off giving sex. Right. So, you don't have sex too quickly, you hold off, you kind of generate the desire of the man without fulfilling it. And so, in a way, having these purity balls is making these women potentially much more attractive, and it might make that easier for them to meet a guy because, in a sense, for obsessive men, meeting a woman who is withholding sex can be the very thing that makes that woman so desirable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are like a lot of really, really, I think, poorly homeschooled. So in addition to being hard to get because they're unavailable, they're also illiterate, and that can be really attractive for obsessive guys too. So yeah,
We're hitting all the things that you like.
yeah, this is I'm starting to understand the appeal now.
Yeah, I remember Jesselneck made a joke. Anthony Jesselneck, he said, like, if I
I
meet a
love him.
beautiful woman, I need to find out if she's intelligent, because if she's not intelligent, she's mine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. He's just like, God, I love his jokes.
very
I
good.
was thinking about the phrase "hard to get" of being like a double entendre. Like you have to be hard to get me.
Yeah,
So it's
very good. And funnily enough, like for most kind of female neurotics, the fundamental fantasy is desire. So you want to be the object that generates the desire of the other, which means you might get more out of making the other person desirous than you do of satisfying their desire in sex.
yeah,
So you get this kind of interesting thing where it works quite well. The guy kind of he wants his desire inflamed by impossibility, and the woman gets a lot of desire from withholding, which is what date night is really, in a sense, is
yeah,
is delaying, and potentially the enjoyment is in the delay itself.
yeah,
Yeah. So that's kind of object A. That's why relationships often suffer, because in in some very basic sense, you're sometimes getting rid of object A, and then the X sets in, and you have to figure out ways of kind of bringing that back.
yeah. If you have you ever do you ever experience ick on a more platonic level? Like you ever like what you're at a bar, you're at, just like a dude, and you're like, oh, not my cup of tea immediately.
Yeah, I'm sure I do. I'm trying to think if that's happened recently. Do you have a recent example of that with you?
Not from me. I know sometimes I'll be watching something on YouTube and it'll be like, who's a good example? But before like Grace, I'll see who gives her the ick, and that's always fun. It'll be like Ben Shapiro. And, or before she knew who that was, or like someone who's like even more obscure, like she won't know
Yeah.
what, she won't even pay attention, but she'll just be like, "Blah," like because it'll be some kind of cadence or some kind of thing that the person's going off about. But it's always very fun to have that kind of, to see it happen, to go, oh,
Yes.
okay, it can happen just through the screen. All right, cool.
And I see it, I definitely see it happening anecdotally and more with women than men. Like that's even a joke, like yeah, often of like kind of
Mm-hmm.
giving women the ick. Um, uh, but I don't know, I haven't thought about why that might
Yeah,
be in any serious way.
there's this TikTok trend that's going around right now that is, I think, the funniest thing I've seen in quite a while. But it's girls who will go back and forth with a bowl, an empty bowl, and two girls, one bowl, and the one girl will say like, "Hi, my name is Angie," and then the next thing will be like the most horrendous trauma that they've ever experienced. And so they'll say, "Hi, my name is Angie. When I was in middle school, my mom wouldn't let me sleep over at my friend's house because she thought the guy was suspicious. And 3 weeks later, we found out that he'd killed 6 people and he's now in prison as a serial killer. And I brought the sweet tarts." And they pour candy in the bowl, and then they pass the bowl, and it goes to the next girl who says something like, "Hi, my name's Sarah, and my parents dropped me off at school late, and I was picked up and kidnapped for 3 days, and the cops had to find me, and I brought the mic, and it's the perfect structure for like a joke structure, and it's also hypnotic to watch these girls crack up at their own trauma. But I was like, this is such a refreshing TikTok trend because it's not using therapy speak and trauma talk in a way that is like, that kind of everyone's got, it's like put upon. And it's like, oh, now you're like sublimating it and making it kind of funny and still talking about dark stuff, but in a way that's not so heavy handed. But I don't know how that's connected to Ick. I just thought
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see more of that in the sense of like what's been seemingly become more difficult is because we live in a type of purity culture where we want to treat everybody right and we want to make sure we're like everyone's good, but actually a lot of people have very traumatic past and experiences, and then apart from that there's also something inherently risky and even traumatic about dating and about kind of that initial connection with another. And it feels like it's becoming more and more difficult for us to manage that stuff. And I think being
Yeah.
able to talk about difficult areas, I mean, you're talking about very dark stuff, but but like even just kind of like uh, the difficulties of encountering and relating to the other, and the fact that the ick will be there sometimes, and that's just part of life. But we get
Yeah.
terrified of that. I know I do. Like,
I have a buddy who he dates a fair bit, and he was telling me about a date that he was on recently, and he got, I don't know if it was the ick per se, but he noticed, and I love him because I don't know many people who do this, but he noticed that she was mirroring him like exactly. And most people, a lot of people, I think, would just sort of keep moving. And he was just stopped and was like, "Are you mirroring me? Like, what are you?" And she was like, "Yeah, yeah, I am." And I was like, "Whoa, I wonder if that is like a conscious," because obviously we all can end up mirroring people unconsciously. But I'm like, is that a conscious way of trying to like ingratiate herself and into his kind of desire or whatever? Like, if I
yeah.
did, she read somewhere that me mirroring this, but then it actually ended up having the opposite effect and had a brief moment of ick. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's that's very interesting. I mean, it's mirroring is obviously so effective, but if you do it consciously, it's very hard to get away with it. We do
It's
it
creepy.
naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, but if you're too caught, because I've done it occasionally, or I've noticed I've been doing it, and then suddenly I've noticed that I'm
Yeah.
mirroring a person, and then it becomes very weirdly kind
Yep.
of awkward. Here's a controversial thought then to throw into the mix, but there's a certain sense in which uh kind of being a man, your sense of power is often related to physical strength
Yes.
and uh
Yes.
and even status and all of that kind of thing. Um, a lot of women from when they're young, they are much more attuned to what I would call metaphysical realities, and metaphysical realities is desire. So desire is not physical. If you tell someone to do something and you're in charge, they'll just do it, right? But if you are able to kind of uh manipulate somebody or flirt with somebody and to get them to do something, that's metaphysical. It's not like you're in the realm of desire. You're in the realm of how do I evoke the other's desire, and how do I kind of uh enact their desire, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think that culturally, and I think it's more than culturally, but partly culturally, that is something that women are much better at. Like that woman was obviously not very good
Yep.
at it. She was mirroring in a very obvious way, but guys have got a very physical notion of cause and effect. And I think women from when they're kind of from puberty onwards have a more metaphysical experience of cause and effect, where I say they don't get what they want by shouting at somebody, which is a very masculine way of doing things. You shout at someone, you tell them authoritatively, but you kind of like you do something much more magical. That's why a lot of men probably burned women as witches, because it's metaphysical. It's like, I don't understand it. How are you manipulating me? How is my
Yeah.
desire being played like a puppet? But
Yep.
that's objet putia, and that's where someone, and we should all do, like, if you want someone to be attracted to you, you kind of want to figure out what the object cause of their desire is and see if you can uh, play into it.
Yeah, I've never had that problem. It's the attraction. Like I've heard stories too about women playing hard to get, never experienced it. Just I guess I'm just lucky that way.
Yeah,
But
whereas
it's
whereas women take hard to get so extreme to me, like, is not answering the phone calls, not answering texts, not,
restraining order. It's just
restraining
like
orders. They play very hard to get.
golly, man. Now, I gotta go to prison now. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll see you when I'm out. Sad. I heard this guy saying the theory right now that the reason Trump is a little more erratic than he has been is because he might be sexually attracted to Kamala and it's short circuiting his brain.
I did hear him say that comment about Kamala. He was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
the nice picture of her in Time magazine, very attractive." And
Very
oh,
beautiful,
it's very
beautiful, more
nice.
beautiful movie star. Well, okay. What else do we have? So there's object petite a, object petite a.
Yeah. Oh, yes, something on that I can mention, which
Yeah.
we've talked about before, desire and drive. But to think about desire as I can't. I wish I remembered I don't even know the titles of our podcast. Who makes them up? Do you make them up?
Me. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, whatever. We did one on drive, one stage demand, desire, drive. But um, desire is kind of like, what we want, and we have objects of desire, and they're never ultimately fulfilling, so we kind of move on. We desire lots of things. That's all very fine. And objet putia is the fuel of desire. So we desire something because, we might want this car because it gives us a certain look in the eyes of the other. Well, we imagine it gives us a certain
Yeah.
look in the eyes of the other. That's what we really desire, So objet putia is the fuel. But then I guess the Lacanian trick is to, in a sense, directly enjoy objet putia. Because what happens within the contemporary world is we're always trying to get over the object cause. So you want to stop looking at houses and buy the house. You want to stop kind of
Yeah.
like looking for recognition and get the award. But in the Lacanian scheme, the answer is not to get the award or to give up your desire, but to kind of perpetually be dissatisfied and perpetually kind of enjoy the fact that you want recognition and don't get it. And somehow, as long as you can kind of get close enough to get a bit of recognition and it works, but also not enough that, you know, you're at the very top of your game. I had a friend who's an actor and he became very famous. And the moment that he was in a big movie, big Hollywood movie, was the moment he hit this moment of absolute despair. It was that like a switch turning on. Now, you know, he got over it and he moved on, but that was because at that point he kind of got the recognition and he was no longer circling. He no longer had this kind of orbit like the planet Earth around the sun. He no longer
Yeah.
had the orbit. He went into the sun and he burned up. So he had to find ways to reorbit the desire.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking of it as like an internal combustion system, but like the object TA is like the kind of explosion or thing that is, you know, but it wouldn't really be an explosion. It's more of a vacuum, right? It's more of like a like you're not gonna get it. It's like a black hole.
Yeah, it's kind of, but I like the internal combustion engine idea because it almost is the thing that fuels us. It's the kind of the energy uh, that almost like a gravitational pull, I guess. Like
Yeah.
you're orbiting something, and if we can get the right distance from it, then we're, you know, we'll be happy enough.
I recently bought new socks and I made a point to get like the tube socks because I heard that Gen Z and younger now what's in is tube socks.
I don't even know what
Now,
they are.
as a
What's that?
tube socks are, well, I'm actually wearing them right now, but they're socks that go like up on your to the lower of your ankle. They go like higher. See,
Oh, I think I
they're
do
hot.
those, but it's because I'm so old that that's, I think, how we used to do it.
Yeah, and these are like white. The Gen Z, the youngins are always using the white ones. I
Oh,
don't know.
wow.
And
Okay.
so, and as a millennial, we were like it was like you better not cover your ankles. You better wear whatever socks you can wear that we can see those ankles. And you got to wear the little tiny ankleless ones or the ones that are cut off right at the ankle, but not tube socks. Those were like your dad's socks. You stay away from those. So I going to get new socks. I'm like, I'm not going quietly into that night of dressing like an old person,
Ah,
but
yeah.
this is now like a young person. This is like, I'm going to try to stay hip. And so I was telling this to my wife, and she was like, why do you want to look like Gen Z?
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I don't really want to look like them. I was like, it was almost like I don't want to be, it just, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to look, I'm supposed to dress in a way that when people look at me, they don't judge me for being a millennial. Like as I thought about it, I was like, yeah, why the hell am I wearing these socks? Like, who
Yes.
cares? And but as soon as she's like, do you want to look like that? Like, uh, she's like, I don't care. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So now I'm
But
just wearing these socks, and I kind of like them though. They're really comfortable.
that's an interesting thing, right? Because you can tell a lot about yourself by going, who do I want to look good for? Who is the other before whom I feel I
Yeah,
have to impress? And it's different people. You know, it might be literally your mother, your father. It might be young people. It might be old people. It might be men. It might be women. But it's like usually when we're doing something like dressing, we're doing it for the gaze of somebody.
yeah,
And so, in a sense, Gen Z, which are young people, you know, you made your, you know, kind of your start in your career by being an object of interest and desire and enjoyment for young people. And I wonder whether in some way that remains, you know, that's like that marked you when you were young yourself. I mean, I guess like what was your average
yeah,
age range watching you on YouTube?
yeah. Probably middle school to college,
Yeah.
which
So
would be the young people
yeah, the young
who
people. So
now are all wearing tube socks.
yes. So you're trying to impress the young people, relive
Yeah, I
the
thought it was
sports
that.
bed
I
days.
thought fear of death. Yeah, like look young, classic kind of deal. But yeah, I don't know. I was like, there's gotta be some kind of reason that I'm doing that's not just, you know, I saw someone say make fun of millennials for their socks. It's almost like a trick too. It's like I'm trying to trick people into thinking I'm younger than I am. Maybe just a fear of aging and a fear of irrelevance and dying slowly. But I don't know. I don't know.
I did hear someone say recently that which it made sense as soon as they said it. It made sense that people don't start dressing old. It's just you keep dressing the way that you dressed when you were young, and
Yeah,
that becomes old.
that is
Yeah.
what I yeah, I'm like, I still want to wear. I do also, I like fashion. Like I enjoy watching the trends. And so occasionally, like there's one trend that I can't do, which is the baggy pants that the kids do now. Again, it's all 90s stuff, but the legs that go straight down. And again, millennials were like, you better wear the tightest jeans in the world. And that took me forever as a youngin to be like, I don't know if I have the confidence to wear like skinny jeans. And now it's all I wear because I made that hurdle. I'm like, oh, am I gonna have to make the hurdle into loose fit jeans now? Like what, that's whew, when does it end? And it doesn't. I guess it's just this everlasting objet petit art that is fueling this. I'm never gonna attain it.
Yeah, and I guess actually the fashion world is the world where they implicitly understand this objet petit.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, obviously, that is it the nephew of Freud went over to New York and became really the key person behind advertising.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, I think
Was he a nephew of Freud? Yeah, who was that?
well,
I don't think the last name was Freud though.
no, it wasn't Freud.
It was like one of the first clinical psychologists, I thought, who like in the Skinner, BF Skinner kind of generation.
Yeah, let me see. Oh yeah.
Some of
So
an M.
Edward Bernays,
Yeah.
Sigmund
Okay.
Freud on two sides, Freud's sister Anna. Yes, I think he was some Edward is it Bernays? Have you heard of this guy?
I feel like I've heard of there was some psychologist or psychoanalyst that was responsible essentially for all advertising that we have now, who like used psychology to create advertising
That's
for the first
probably
time.
him. And then he invited Freud over, and Freud took nothing to do with it. But it is interesting because Freud didn't invent the objet petit, but it's kind of in Freud implicitly, and then Lacan brings it out. But like Freud was very much understanding this notion of how our desire as adults are connected very much with things like symbolic recognition, the desire of the other's desire, what's called mimetic desire today. And so
Mm-hmm.
advertising was all about that. There's different types of advertising. There was a time where advertising would just show you what the machine did. If it was a car, it would show you how good the car
Yeah.
was, how fast it was, how reliable it was. But you see how advertising develops into a symbolic thing, that an advert can tell you nothing about the car, like nothing, no information. It won't tell you how fast it goes, what 0 to 60 in, or how many miles it can do without needing what, an air change or whatever. Like you could watch an advert for a Toyota or something, and you kind of go, my goodness, I know nothing about this car in terms of its just physical abilities. But what it has is it has figures that, might unconsciously remind me of my mother and father, or,
Yeah.
make me think that I'll be more attractive to the opposite sex, whatever it is. And advertising is and fashion is brilliant at that.
You'll be more American if you buy this car, more patriotic,
Yes. Oh, yeah.
hero. Um, yeah, and then you got like the what was it, Mad Men? Like I don't know if it's the first episode, but when they show the advertisement for the VW and it just says this is a lemon.
Oh, I see. I haven't watched Mad Men. I've heard it's amazing. So,
That's like a real advertisement. It's like one of the first like counterintuitive thing where it shows. Are you looking it up?
yeah.
Yeah, look up lemon VW ad. It's like, and they're like baffled by it. Yeah, it just says lemon on it.
Oh, yes, I've got it. Very wow. Yes. Because it has a kind of a look, I guess, of a lemon a little bit. Was that
Yeah,
the
there's a
idea?
whole history behind it, but it's definitely, I think, the first time. And if you run out of gas, it's easy to push. Yeah, I think the whole idea is it was one of the first times where they were like, this isn't going to make you look cool. This car is designed to be efficient, but not a muscle car. So I don't know,
Yeah. Well, one of
but it was
my
very eye catching.
yeah, one of my favorite adverts. This wasn't actually one of my favorite adverts, but it has no relevance to this, I don't think. But is do you have polos in America? The mints with a
Oh,
bow.
I don't polos.
Polos, Polo,
I
polos.
don't
No,
think so.
they were iconic mints back home. I don't know if they're still sold, but there's a really famous advert from the 80s where it said in the old days, each polo mint, the word polo was carved in the hand, and it has this person carving polo into
Hmm.
it. And it said nowadays it's all done by machines, and then it goes black, and then you have a machine hand just carving each polo. It's very good.
That's great.
But an advert that I found really interesting that Sprite did, because I think it's actually this brings in this idea of objet pudia in an interesting way, is Sprite did this advertising campaign where they kind of explicitly attacked and critiqued the idea that you would drink something because it makes you cool, that it, makes you look good, right? So it was a whole advertising campaign saying Sprite will not make you cool.
Yeah.
Sprite will not make you more attractive. Sprite, da, 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 and then it just says Sprite, it'll just quench your thirst. That was it. And the irony for me was two things. Was one, I think it's called a diuretic. Like it basically Sprite won't quench your thirst, right? It's like it'll make it's full of
Yeah.
sugar, various things. You want to quench your thirst, drink water, right? So the one thing it was saying was that, but also the really interesting thing about the advert is it was basically selling I'm a no nonsense person who doesn't get the wool
Yeah.
pulled over my eyes by stupid adverts. So even that as an attempt to go, this is not selling you an image. This is just selling you a drink, was
Hmm.
selling you the image of the type of person who doesn't fall for images. Um,
Yeah.
and that's obviously,
Wonderful.
yeah, yeah,
Do you remember the campaign for Seven Up? That it would be. This is like an early late 90s early 2000s, I guess, but it was make Seven Up yours. And so it was this guy who was like trying to brag about what a good I forget his name. He was a pretty famous actor, but he would say make Seven Up yours as their new phrase, but he would have the shirt and on the front it said make seven, and then on the back it said up yours. And so as he's walking along, people are like throwing things at him and screaming at him because they think his shirt says up yours. It's
oh,
very funny.
very good, very good. Well,
That's a classic. They don't make ads like that anymore.
yeah, well, the one that was massive, I'm sure you've heard of it, but it was French Connection. Do you hear this? Like French Connection were a fashion brand. They weren't doing well. I think they were in decline. And like the very famous advertising firm created French Connection UK, so FC UK. That was it, FC UK. So it looks like fuck, right?
Yep.
So simple, super cool, and that turned them around.
Yeah.
That
Man,
left the UK,
advertising is fascinating. I mean, it
Yes.
is like the whole that the people who do that are masterminds and dark wizards because the
Yeah.
stuff that the way that they play us.
Yes. Yes. Well, the trick then in advertising and in life and in objet and in the ick for me is trying to figure out what our object A is individually and how it's hooks us. And by understanding it, I think we can navigate it better. That's
Yep.
kind of like that's the kind of trick phrase. Like, so there's two things that we've talked about uh from the beginning. One was you're desiring somebody and then suddenly something just changes.
Poof.
That's lost, right? That's a bit of a tragedy. And a lot of people go into therapy because of that, because they've lost their objet pudiad. And then the other side, which is, oh, I desire things that I shouldn't. I desire things that are actually damaging to me, even
Hmm.
like, I mean, people can be, like being an exhibitionist or a voyeur, right? So they're a voyeur, that's their sexuality, and they're going like, I'm going to get arrested, I'm going to get put on a sex offenders list, or, I'm going to like, this is
Yep.
not good, right? So they're at odds with society. And they want to drain their objet putia of its enjoyment. So whether we don't want to desire what we desire or we do want to desire what we don't desire, these are all problems with object A. Um,
I mean, that's like an almost a great advertisement for psychoanalysis.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, the a word that I like to use just because I think it's fun to say is deep potentiate, like the draining of the object.
Oh,
Uh,
that's good. I don't
Depotentiate
know
is
that
just
word.
fun.
Say the word.
Depotentiate, like,
Oh,
depotentiate, like,
depotentiate. Oh, yes,
yeah,
yeah, yes, very good. Oh, yeah, yeah.
it's a good word.
Draw the potential out of it, or the potency,
Yeah,
just draw the potency out of it. Oh,
yeah,
yeah, that's very good. That's very good. Yeah.
potency, power. Do you have anything else?
Um, let's see. No, I think that's yeah. No, I think I'm kind of good on that. Do you have any
No,
insights, any takeaways?
no, I think the ick is fun. I think that hmm, the only thing I would think as a final note that I think is interesting is and this goes kind of to my back to sort of maybe my Gen Z obsession, but the updating of language and lingo. Ick, I think, is pretty good in terms of I mean, obviously we're doing a podcast episode on it, but everyone knows what it is the moment you hear it. Like when I first heard, like, oh, here's a clip of Taylor Swift, right? The moment she got the ick, I was like, I know exactly what that means, and I know exactly what that feels like, and I know exactly what it feels like to be on the other side of that. And so I really like when there are words that are perfect, and I think that's as close as you can get.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I thought of another example because I'm going like it's very sad because this is true because we don't want to be like this. But I did talk to somebody a woman who was in a relationship, and her partner did something really inane, like the very famous song with Taylor Swift,
Mm-hmm.
but it might have been he did something that was kind of unmasculine in some way, just in a very smallest way. Like he, couldn't fix some leak in the sink or something like that. And she was like, I didn't want that. I didn't want to suddenly not be attracted. I didn't want the ick. There's didn't want, but
Yeah.
it just overcame me. And it's kind of like, that's what's interesting. And I guess when you don't know what you're attracted to and why, you're probably more in danger of that happening, right?
Yeah.
Because out of nowhere, you're going like, why did I suddenly why did the scales fall? Why did the fantasy diminish in such a small way? And how do you protect yourself from that? I mean, that's the terrifying thing is there's not really a protection against this. Um,
No.
yeah, like I went out with somebody. She said to me, it's the same girl actually who had the energy bar. And she said to me, I just suddenly am not attracted to people I'm attracted to. And we laughed about it. And I said, is that going to happen, with us, do you think? And in my head, I was like, yep, that's going to happen, And
It's right now, isn't it? It's happening right now. Is
probably
it?
right
Is that
now. Well, no, I got another 6 months out of it. And
oh
then
good?
and then it happened. And then it
Sure enough.
happened. I could just tell the moment when it happened. I was like, oh, there it is. There's the energy bar. And it just went to zero. And the funny thing is that she knew herself that this wasn't good. It's not what she wanted. She was like, it really annoys me. Like, why?
Yeah.
What can I do about this? But yeah, and we're still friends, but the desire just dropped.
Well, I hope you're not beating yourself up over it too much
Yeah.
because
I
as
wish
the
I'd been able
poet,
to fix that leak. That was it.
yep.
Yep.
And that, yeah, then you would have been fine. And maybe not wearing a dress. That was a weird
Yes.
choice. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, she liked that. Yeah.
what I'll do is speaking of that, I last night I was like telling my wife to text me about snaking her drain.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, can you send me a
That
text?
euphemism.
I know. I was like, can you send? So yeah, I was like, babe, can you send me a text? This is like 11 o'clock to snake your drain, and she was like, all right. And then like she texted me, and then I replied, and I was like, that's disgusting. Leave me alone. Like, grow up. And and then I also was like using it as a reminder to actually snake or drain. And then I was like, oh, I'm also getting her to text me. I'm letting her know that I'm aware of her drain needing to be, cleaned. And and so that was my way of also being like, I'm not really doing it right now, but I just want you to know that I know that it's happening and hoping that that makes it seem like I'm really on top of things.
Yeah.
But who knows if I'll
I
actually remember to do it today.
I also, by the way, like it's hard for me not just to see this as a massive euphemism. So
Yeah, oh, totally. Yeah. They're like, babes, like, oh, gross, but come on. That's it's not right now. Anyway, it's very fun. As the poet W.H. Auden says, we are lived by powers we pretend to understand. And one of those powers is the ick. Thank you, everybody, for being with us on this episode of The Fundamentalists.